The value of the center stoppage is extremely high. With the implementation of the 666 rules especially, there is guaranteed space at either end of the ground, and this leads to an unmatched scoring potential that you won't find in any other situation. At a general level, there are only two strategies available at the center stoppage. This is normally dictated by the ruck matchup itself. The superior tap ruckman will look to dominate the stoppage and look to win the tap and get first use of the ball, while the inferior tap ruckman or pressure ruckman will simply look to pressure along with his midfield and create a turnover. The nature of these stoppages is simply chaotic. There is a lot of different tactics at a more specific, detailed level, and every stoppage will play out differently. Beyond these broad themes, you've got a bit of a contrast at a team level strategy. So, for example, Richmond are suited in general to a pressure strategy. Their overall game plan is territory oriented, chaotic, very high tempo, and they value playing into the dangerous space in which to score. This is a contrast to Geelong, who are more suited to a dominant strategy. Their game style is possession oriented, far more orderly, a lower tempo, and they'll play into the controlled spaces. Now, on field, how does this play out? You've got a hierarchy here that I'll list, starting with the coach off field, then the shot caller, who is your on-field leader, and the players below them. So what is a shot caller? My definition is the player who decides and directs stoppages while playing as part of the midfield. Now, who should this person be? I think the default answer is who's got the most leadership ability and who's got the most experience and general competence in order to make the calls. So the important thing to note here is that there is a super high degree of player autonomy, which means the players themselves have to understand this stuff well enough to adapt and execute in the moment. The ball will become live on the inside. So it's important, if you want to control the ball, to control the inside. You can see here with the graphic, if you follow my cursor, the inside is very congested and it's going to be difficult to use the ball well. So if possible, you move to the outside to attack. So if you look at the outside here, outside space for the red player at the back of the contest, outside space for the blue player at the back of the contest. If we raise the question, how do we distribute our players outside versus inside? This is your default answer. The ruckman will always be inside. There's one rover inside who will be forward of the ruckman. There's one rover outside who will be backwards of their ruckman. And one rover in a balanced position to their opposition, wide of the ruckman. So for a practical example, we're going to look at Paddy Ryder tapping it forwards to the inside player in Nathan Jones, who will hand pass to the outside player in Jack Steele, and from that position, Steele can kick the ball forwards. So Ryder taps to his inside player who's at the front and moves to the backwards player who is forward facing and can move the ball forwards. For another example from the wider position, we're going to look at Pendlebury versus Wines. So Pendlebury is going to work Wines under the ball and then exploit the space on the outside. So we see them here engage into a bodywork contest. Grundy will win the tap, put it to Pendlebury's advantage, and Wines, from that position, it's very difficult for him to move backwards. You can only really go forwards. We're going to look at a few different bodywork methods. This one will be looking at Travis Boak here on the left and Taylor Adams on the right. So the first thing I want you to see is that they're in this wider position. The second is just how far back they are from the center circle contest. From this, they're able to move forwards. And what they're essentially doing is competing for front position. So the way they're going to tussle is by shoving into each other's armpit and chest region. So we'll play it forward to watch in slow motion. So they're coming in with forward momentum and trying to get just that slight advantage for front position. Now, because they're so locked into each other, it's very difficult for them to disengage and look for the loose ball. And that's normal for such a mirrored matchup. How do you get around a mirrored matchup? How do you generate an advantage? Well, we're going to watch Cripps here. So Cripps versus O'Connor on the left here. You can see if we play it forwards and pause quite early, he's actually moving his man back. He's going to be pushing into him to generate space that he can then run forwards into. So push back to go forwards. I'll play it forward just a second here, and you'll see with these arms, Cripps is actually preventing O'Connor from pushing into him by controlling his arm. Now, this isn't 100% legal if you grab the arm, but you can definitely push the opponent's arm away. That's definitely legal. So with this, he's able to prevent O'Connor pushing into him, and you'll see here, he's also able to push into Connor. This generates an advantage, and he can hit this contest at pace with front position, which is what he wants. Now, unfortunately, the ball drop doesn't quite favor him. That's the inherent chaos in these stoppages. You can't control every factor. Last bodywork method, we're going to look at Ed Curnow for Carlton, taking on Cam Guthrie for Geelong here. So Ed is going to lock on to Guthrie's upper arm with his own arm. So he's going to squeeze Guthrie's arm between his forearm and bicep and prevent Guthrie from going anywhere. This is a really extreme tagging method because it also prevents, if we pause it here, it also prevents Curnow from getting to a ball that is actually in his zone. Play it forward half a second. This is where you can see the best angle of what it looks like. Guthrie is totally controlled here, one arm controlling his left side, and Curnow's left arm, his own left arm, is pushing into Guthrie to just stabilize the balance. So at this point, Ed's gonna let go, but he can't affect the ball. So it's a very defensive negation method. For clarity, I want to outline where the positions are, and they are in relation to your own Ruckman. So if we look at the top here, in the red perspective, the forward rover is forward of your Ruckman, the backwards rover is backwards of the Ruckman, and the wide is wide of the Ruckman. So sometimes most of the time you'll see a rotation around the circle. That still is the case in terms of positions. The forward rover is forward of the Ruckman in a straight line essentially. Wide is wide to that 90-degree angle, and backwards is backwards behind. The drop zone is the area the ball will land in, and the hit zone is the area where the Ruckman will place the ball. So they are distinct but a little bit interchangeable terms. So the Ruckman will use a soft tap using their palm to place the ball on the inside of the stoppage. The forehand tap is standard, it's easiest to execute. So if you think about forehand like in tennis, you've got a forehand and a backhand motion. Now, the forward momentum that a ruck has as they're running up and leaping up to get that height creates forward momentum on the ball. So with all these things taken together, what you end up with, if you look at my cursor, is this orthodox preferred hit zone forward and left of the Ruckman. And that is effectively between the wide rover and the forward rover. Matchups between Ruckman can be defined best in a spectrum between being fully dominated at 0% control and being fully dominant at 100% control. So the more dominance you have, the easier it is to execute unorthodox plays. And the more even it is, the more orthodox you sort of have to be. So in an even matchup, drawn taps will typically fall sideways and close. Both rucks will get hands to it at the same time. And one taps in a truly even matchup are mostly sideways and forwards. So if you look at the top right graphic here, that's what you'll see. In truly dominant matchups, the Ruckman can sort of go anywhere that they like. There's a clear chain of influence on positioning. It starts from the Ruckman, who's got his preferred hit zone, and the two rovers who are going to be within that zone. At the end of the chain is the sweeper. In this graphic, which is a demonstration of a very standard setup, you've got the sweeper rotating around to be at the opposite end of the hit to zone. So what this does is it creates a really nice and even spread of territory. So where you get mismatches and clashes in positioning is where the teams will have different structures, or the rovers will have a clash between their offensive duties and their defensive duties, especially from the difference in forward rovers and sweepers. For an example, we'll look at the Bulldogs and the Suns. The Suns defend this in a very standard manner, but the Bulldogs have a more advanced setup, what I call the Vortex. We'll discuss that in more detail later. What you want to see here is that Tim English is not coming in directly forwards. He's come in at a bit of an angle. And what this will do is change the hit zone dynamic. So instead of the hit zone being directly forward and to his left, it's actually going to be forwards and to the right a little bit. So Bailey Smith, who would nominally be the sweeper, will move forward to engage that. Bontempelli, who is actually the sweeper, will come around from behind, and Jack McRae will come inside. And what this is going to do is create a mismatch between Bailey Smith and Took Miller. Create some separation, and that's where Tim English will go. The Bulldogs to get what is a very clean exit. So we'll play it forward here. And you can see, clean as a whistle, that is exactly what you want from the first bounce of a game. Within 5 seconds, they're 30 metres out from goal. If you want a really clean and dangerous clearance, what you need to do is run into the open space, not into other players. That's what we'll see here, West Coast versus Adelaide. So right here, you see this is a double pivot structure, so it's more advanced, it's not quite standard. But if we play it forward a little bit, it is still very standard. So what we see here is Yo and I believe Shui as the hit 2 targets. Nick Nat's coming in from this angle, which is natural for him to hit this area. So you can think of Yo, he can start in this area and make the same run. What he's going to do is run forwards into this exit space. The exit space is towards the wing, not towards the blockages of players either side, but towards the wing areas, and from that area you can go forwards. Especially for a right footer, you want to come out to this side, and for a left footer you want to swing around out to that side. So if we play it forward, that is exactly what we'll see here. Bang. With a bit of pace, you can look at him go. And that's a goal, exactly what you want. I just want to come back a step just to make one follow-up point, and that's the ability of Yo to draw this player and exploit the space over the top. So Cripps has made the right call. He's not gone to Yo, he's gone off Yo, which forces a quandary for his opponent. Do I come to close down Yo and leave my man free, or do I go with my man and leave Yo free? That's a win-win for the ball carrier. That's exactly what you want to make your opponent choose between, two loss scenarios. We've got a bit of a summary for the proactive perspective, the dominant ruck perspective, and this is the orthodox version, the standard version. So you have Goldstein, left-handed inside ruck, so he's got, coming in this angle, he's got his forward rover here, Thomas, and he's got his wide rover here. Remember, the guy at the back, the sweeper, is the one who's forward-facing in space, and he's the guy that gets utilised as the attacking outlet. Run forwards, kick it long to a dangerous position. The alternative for a proactive dominant ruck, or even an even ruck that's trying to be proactive, is to have 3 inside rovers. So instead of that sweeper being way at the back, he's going to come inside and really dominate that inside first use for the ball. So if we play it forward, that is what we'll see here from the Swans. So if we pause it just about here, you can see Hickey He's got forward to the left and forward to the right, but his sweeper here in Parker is not way at the back. He's really coming inside. He's very much in there. They've got 3 front position rovers, so Sydney are in a really, really strong position to get first use of the ball. And with the tap being won by Hickey to Hewitt, that's really good. So the pass here does come out the back, like it makes sense that it would, but Parker isn't in the same space and is getting shut down by Sheed, so the kick isn't quite as damaging. This time, instead of being up at 30 yards from goal, it's just at the top of the 50, but it'll still work out into a goal for Sydney. We've established what the preferred hit zone is, and here we're going to talk about the details involved, and it's a bit of a paradox if the rovers are set up in certain ways. So on the left graphic, if you follow the cursor, the blue rover is either in front or on the inside of that preferred hit zone. Remember, the red ruckman running in wants to hit to his left and forward. So with this setup with the 2 rovers for blue, they're basically cutting off the entire area. It's only the edges that are available, and that makes it much harder for the dominant red ruckman to hit his preferred zone. So if you compare it here to the graphic on the right, the red rover, the forward red rover, is in this graphic either in front or to the right in the middle of that zone rather than on the edge. That makes it much easier for his ruckman to find him. For a reactive perspective, for a less dominant ruckman or just an even but defensive setup, we're going to look at Sydney again. This time I want you to look at Sydney's setup from this preferred hit zone paradox. So we'll go this color. For Fremantle, their ruckman's coming in, he's got the forward option and he's got the wide option, but it's cut off by Sydney's rovers on the inside. So really he's got a very narrow channel on either edge, which to actually hit within that zone. He can hit to the outside, but it's much harder for him to hit that angled ball. Now we'll compare that to Hickey's approach. He's coming in on this angle, so it's easier for him to hit forward, and he's got, within Fremantle's preferred zone, he's got that dominance. So he actually wants to direct the ball here, and in essence that has turned what was Fremantle's preferred zone into a Sydney zone, and that can be an incredibly powerful tactical victory where essentially you're winning before the dice are rolled. So we'll clear that up and we'll watch it play forward. This becomes a very simple, a very standard execution, but like with most high skill things, the trick is to keep it simple. The trick is to execute it simply. These things are very difficult. When you've got 2 teams that want to back in their own system or want to really compete for dominance, but it's still pretty even, that's where you can get the mismatches, the differences in positioning, the real clear differences, and that's what we'll see here. So rather than having forward rovers, each team has gone for sort of the more defensive approach. They've got 2 wide rovers either side and then a sweeper each. So that creates a scenario where each ruckman actually wants to tap it backwards. So backwards either to their wide rover or backwards to directly their sweeper. We'll play it forwards and that's what you'll see here. In this scenario, as you see, Gone wins the tap and they work it out through their sweeper. So it makes a lot of sense how it happened. No presentation on rucks or centre stoppages from me would be complete without at least one clip from our homeboy, represent Portland, Rowan Marshall. So as the tap ruckman, that's what we'll see here. His role offensively as a tap ruckman is to win the tap, then push forward if he can make a difference. Defensively, ball hits the deck, just pressure like a madman. So we'll play it forward, and that's what we'll see here. Wins the tap to his preferred hit zone. His rovers are able to work it out. You can see Marshall is pushed forward, and he's able to impact the contest, gets another kick in. So As a ruckman, he's done his job really, really well there. If you're not a tap ruckman, you're a pressure ruckman. So offensively, still pretty similar, but even more important that you can run off and create on the spread. And defensively, even more important that you pressure. You pressure and do everything you can to stop the other guy, the dominant tap ruck, getting a clean clearance. So what we see here is Grundy for Collingwood and Pickett. Total size mismatch. Grundy gets the tap, but Richmond as a collective effort are able to work it out to a really damaging clearance. So from just about here, I want to emphasize, if you know that you're coming in as a midfielder, as a rover, if you know you're coming into this stoppage as the pressure team with the pressure ruckman, you've got to be way more defensive. And that's what Cochin is able to do here. His pressure to not only stop the goal getting the gather, but push him over and take him out of the contest is what enables this Richmond clearance. And to bring it back to Pickett, you can see here 50, follow my cursor, he is the first guy forward. He's ready to make that difference in this next contest. And Grundy has, pressured, done what he can, but this is where Pickett knows he can make the difference and effectively has to make the difference. Your hit to rover is your first and most important role. It's very literal. It's the person the ball is hit to. So in this example, it'll be Jack Steele from Paddy Ryder. But as we've seen before, the hit to is a role. It's not a position. So your normal positions are this wide area coming in like that, and the forward area played by their number 5. As we've seen before, it can be literally anywhere. So you can be over here, you can be a hit to starting at the back. It's a role, not a position. So in this example, it's wide, that's very normal. We'll play it forward. Your offensive role is to collect the ball from the tap and use it to maximum advantage. You can run it out directly yourself, or you can pass it to the guy who's free and can do that, as we see in this example. Defensively, if you don't get it, you're probably in a place where the ball is close, so you tackle like a madman. If you're not roving it from your own ruckman, but you're roving it from the opposition ruckman, you're what's called a sharker. So that's what we'll see in this example. Had a false start, and we see a little bit of Melbourne's intent. So Ollie Wine, 16, has learnt his lesson, and then on the second take, knows exactly where to go. If your only focus is to shut down your direct opponent, you're playing as what's known as a tagger. So that's what we see here. Ed Kernow will tag Dom Sheed on the left here. Gonna stick right close to him, not give him any space. Sheed will gather the ball, but is in no position to do anything, so great defensive pressure. If you're playing defensively, but not so focused on your man that you're a tagger, you're what's known as a blocker. So that makes you sort of a combination between a sharker and a tagger. So what we'll see here from Jack Viney. His man is Tom Mitchell. Mitchell so far has had no success trying to get the ball on the inside. So instead, he's going to play the outside. And that gives Jack Viney the opportunity to take easy inside access. And that's what we'll see here. As a blocker, your role is to collect any of these type of loose balls, and if not getting it yourself, apply maximum pressure. So it's all about the zone, the blocking zone, rather than tagging a man. We've mentioned a few things about the sweeper already so far, so here's an opportunity to summarize that specifically. You are the forward-facing rover at the back of the stoppage. So for West Coast, that is Tim Kelly. From this position, you're an outlet for the inside players. And defensively, you want to shut down that forward rover for them. So as this outlet, you can run forwards and make your impact like that. So that's what we'll see here. Play it forward. Kelly able to burst forward, hit his man, one-on-one contest, deep forward, and that's a guaranteed goal. I want to stop just at this point. This is the point where, let me go back a second. So this is the point where Tim Kelly starts to move forward. It's a loose contested ball. He thinks, I can get this. Until he knows he can get it, he's just going to hold his space. It works out really well because Nick Nat is actually able to pick it up for him and just let him loose. So Tim Kelly adjusts the run, trying to get it himself, to just getting it from a teammate. But incredible decision-making, timing, and execution from Tim Kelly there. You're a midfielder, but you're not in the centre. So you're playing on a wing. What do? You play defensive goal side. So you see that on both wings. It is the standard setup. Your role is to be an outlet for the inside players, just like the sweeper. Collect any loose balls, and primarily you're just going to shut down your direct opponent defensively. So the only reason to come inside is to act on a really clear opportunity to impact the contest, to get the loose ball yourself, or to apply some tackling. So at this point, I want to point out the difference here. We've got the Brisbane guy coming inside. He comes inside because he thinks Zorko is going to pick up the ball and he can get used as an outlet. You see the feet here of Bailey Smith? He's held his space, and he is going to be the one that actually does get used on the outside. You can run forward and try to make a really damaging entry inside 50. There is a really high punishment for this kind of misplay. Coming in and not impacting the contest is the worst possible scenario. So you only do it if it's basically guaranteed to be effective. For your deep forwards and backs, obviously backs are usually going to man up. And for the forwards, that means you're proactive. You get to dictate the structures. So at a foundational level, you're going to have your guy, Tom Hawkins in this case, in the goal square. And you're going to have at least one marking target, 30 yards out. You can have a secondary guy. You can have, a guy over here or a guy over here and have 3-3 rather than a 4-2 here. But if you've got really strong marking targets, you can isolate those. And that's what Geelong are doing. So they've got 4 guys set up at the 50, ready to come forward or run back into the marking contest, ready to crumb or, ready to impact forwards. We're into the overall structures now, like the specific structures that they set up to execute. The first, most basic, most reliable is your front spot. So low risk, low reward, very orthodox, we've seen it before. 2 hit 2 options, forward and wide. You prioritize the inside availability and pressure. And as that rover, as the ball's bounced up, you're moving slowly and directly forwards into the contest, ready to gather the ball. Complementary, you got that sweeper on the outside. So the position of the hit 2 rovers in both examples dictated to by the dominant ruckman and their position, or is your ruckman dictating your rover's positioning. Okay. There's no better example for us to see the front spot than the first bounce of the grand final from last year. So Geelong have the tap ruckman, who's got a bit of dominance, everyone knows that, playing around that over Nankervis, so wide rovers to his side rather than out here to Nankervis' side. You've got your front position from both Geelong guys, and Cochin playing pretty defensive on the Geelong sweeper. So we'll play it forward, and you can see that Selwood, even though he gathers the ball, isn't really in a position where there's space, so he just gets a quick kick away. And if we play it back, I just want to emphasise the Richmond ruckman as the pressure ruck. His duty is to pressure, and he's able to affect the spoil. So it works out to Richmond's advantage. The things that you can do to generate a more dangerous, powerful clearance are to move literally to move at pace if you can. So the Bulldogs do this better than anyone else currently, and I call it a Vortex setup. High risk and high reward. So everybody essentially is on the move, and they're not moving directly forwards into the contest. They're moving at an angle which enables them to break away. So they're spinning around the circle and ready to leave the gravitational pull. The really unique thing about the Bulldogs is that all of their rovers basically are left footers. So for them to do this Vortex, it's not going to be a right side spinning circle, it's going to be a left side spinning circle, which will be clockwise in our example. So Bontempelli starts wide, but he's going to come around. Libber will start back and he's going to come forward. And Dunkley is going to start forward and left here, but he's going to run to there. So you can see fairly clearly everyone's in this spin cycle. We'll clear those arrows and we'll push forward, and you'll be able to see with a very orthodox preferred zone tap, Team English is able to set the dogs free, running. It's their winger who's stayed outside, who's the one that finally gets released. He runs all the way forward, that it's a pure midfield goal. So in the space of 10 seconds, the Dogs have scored. Another setup designed to manufacture space where there otherwise wouldn't be is what I'm calling the double pivot. So there are two versions, a defensive version and an offensive version. But they both function with two rovers as a vertical pair at one end of the circle and one rover at the other end. So the defensive variation, we see the top graphic, you've got two guys at forward roving positions. So the Ruckman will usually rotate around for them to have that easier access and make that hit zone instead of directly upwards and to the right. It's more 45 degrees forward either side, and you've got that sweeper at the back. So what this does for a defensive option is it clogs up all of the opposition's sweeping space, their attacking outlet space. There's none of that, and you also get the basic forward momentum on the ball, which is very useful. Football, a simple game. So the offensive option we see below is having your own side have those two sweepers and for them to run forwards. That opens up the space that they can run into. This is something overall as a double pivot. Overall, you want to do more when you have control. When you're a more dominant ruckman, you can do this with more reliability. For our offensive example, we're going to look at Nick Nat and the Eagles. They're the best team that does this and by far the one that does it the most. So here's two sweeping players are Dom Sheed and Tim Kelly, and his forward hit two rover in this example is Yao. So Nick Nat, because he's Nick Nat, can do a bit of an unorthodox tap. He's faking like he's going to run around and hit a tap through an orthodox zone backwards, but he's actually going to do an unorthodox tap forwards. Just because he's Nick Nat, he can do these things. So the space, just to reiterate, the space generated from this setup is forward and to the side of these central rovers here, central forward rover and their sweeper. It's into this exit space. And from this, you can make really dangerous forward 50 entries. That's the goal, and that is what we'll see here. Nick Nat with the left hand taps it forward into that space. Tim Kelly as a sweeper, blitzing past. They can't catch him. You can't stop him once he's already moving. And it's a one-on-one marking contest in West Coast goal square, 7 seconds in. That's awesome. For our defensive example, we're going to look at Melbourne. Maxi Gawn here has got two forward hit twos, Cosy Pickett and Clayton Oliver here. You can see a little bit in the difference of setups. Whereas Dustin Martin is prioritizing his own offensive role here as a wide hit to Fernand Curvis playing here. So that's the difference here. Clayton Oliver also wants to be in his offensive position where he can receive the ball forwards from Gawn, and that's where space can be generated. But in this example, it'll actually be Pickett getting the ball. Now, unlike The offensive version, you don't get the same space forward of the ball. So Pickett is able to, collect the tap, but he doesn't have space to run into. So his clearance kick is a lot shallower, but nevertheless, it is a clearance win for Melbourne. There are definitely some things you can do as the reactive team, and one of those is to have a lone shark making a run. So we saw Ollie Wines do it from a sort of opportunistic point, but you can do it on a more premeditative version. So the shark, in this case, Rover making a run into the opposing rock's preferred hit zone. So a lot of deceit and surprise involved. You're trying to catch them off guard, and there's a lot of different methods in you can do this, but generally it's sharking run into opponent's hit zone area. So again, to reiterate, for the red ruckman, that hit zone is forward and left. If you're ever going to make these kinds of setup plays, it's more likely to happen at the start of a quarter when you've had a bit of time to think. So for Brisbane, they've got a dominant ruckman who's looking to hit to two guys in his preferred hit zone. And for Richmond, they've also got, two guys in their hit zone. But Bolton is actually making a bait play. He's going to do the lone shark thing. So he's going to run around and try to shark it from in front of the two Brisbane Rovers here. See here, only after the bounces Bolton make his move, everybody's looking at the ball, and he almost gets it, but just overruns it. It's very much a timing thing and very delicate. A very small window. For our successful example, we're going to see Zorko, instead of being hit two, he's going to shark it from Stanley. Going to make that same play, run and into the exit space, the dangerous exit space. So play it forward. Nice tap from Stanley, but straight down Zorko's throat. Another reactive setup or balanced defensive setup is what I'm calling the inverse setup. So this is essentially what Tom Hickey did in his Sydney examples, and you can imagine Tom Hickey as the blue ruckman here. So he's adjusted his position to enable him to hit his targets, which are forward here and to the right. He can also do a more orthodox thing where he just goes straight forward, and his blue guy in an even coverage has got access there. But in the inverse setup, it's really turning the red ruckman's zone against them. So the importance from the Rovers' positioning is really high. It's really important they be front position if they can. For our example, we are watching Hickey. So he's coming in at his preferred angle, and that enables him to hit directly forward and a little bit to the right to his man Josh Kennedy. But he's also got his normal inside rover straight forwards there as well. For a counter, Rowan Marshall has decided he's not going to go straight forward. He's going to come in either from directly down or at an angle similar to Hickey's. But again, it's both these guys, both looking to hit forward generally. And front position in this kind of scenario for the Rovers is really, really important. So we'll play it forward. It's a nice tap from Hickey to Kennedy, who sets Tom Papley as a sweeper free. And that's actually a free kick to Franklin. You can see, so mark and set shot at goal 30 metres out, 5 seconds. So what are your options when you can't really contest the ruck? One of those is just full tagging. That's what we see from Adelaide. All three of their Rovers are going to get right on their man and shut them down directly, force a turnover, and then they can go. see here from Shui at wide receiver, he's going to make a fake run to create a little space for himself, but it's not quite enough. Still gets tackled, gets a handball out, and at that point right there, Adelaide's plan, the tagging, actually was successful. They got possession of the ball, they just couldn't use it with a set word. Our final option is what the Bulldogs do here. That is full team sharking. They've got their replacement Ruckman in. Bruce, he's not really a Ruckman, he's a forward. And all of their players, all of their rovers are in front position looking to shark. You can see here the exit space for Essendon is just massive. So it's a really risky setup for the Bulldogs. But if you look at the scoreboard and the time, they sort of are compelled to do this kind of drastic approach, both by needing to chase the game with not much time left, very much trying to play to win, and the presence of their secondary ruckman. They can't do anything with the tap because they're not going to win the tap. So that's what we'll see here. Everybody's sharking, getting in front position. Draper wins a tap, but it's a bit of a scrappy affair. Bruce able to pressure, able to get a handball out. Handball chain, which is what the Dogs do really well, have for a long time. And it'll end up with the mark on the wing.